The last steam trains left a ringing echo in the hills, long after their whistles fell silent. Village stations closed quietly, with handwritten notices curling in the damp glass of empty board. Grass crept over sidings where schoolchildren once waved at guards leaning from smoky carriage doors. Ticket offices turned into kitchens and living rooms, timetables painted over with magnolia and family photographs. On Sunday evenings, the platform clocks kept perfect time for trains that would never arrive again. Elderly porters folded their caps away in drawers, along with whistles and stories nobody had requested. The Beeching report spoke in miles and deficits, but villages heard only the word closure like a verdict. Children traced vanished branch lines on dog-eared atlases, fingers following ghost tracks through blank countryside. Where the branch once curved behind the chapel, dog walkers now follow a path of crushed nettles and silence. Bridges remain, carrying nothing but wind and the drip of rainwater into pools on the old ballast. Old men stand at stile gates, still turning their heads at any distant rumble on the main road. In winter fog, the cutting fills with breathless white, as if steam might condense back into existence. A rusting milepost leans at an impossible angle, stubbornly insisting this is still 78 miles from London. Villages once timed their days to the passing of the morning goods, not the arrival of a delivery van. The last station master locked his signal box and walked home along sleepers. He would never stride in uniform again. Signals froze forever at danger, bright red eyes slowly blinded by ivy and hawthorn over 50 damp summers. The newspapers called it modernization. In the bar of the village pub, it was spoken of as an amputation. Some lines became tidy footpaths with information boards. Others simply sank beneath bramble and unsaid resentment. On certain anniversaries, local papers print sepia photographs of crowded platforms now occupied by garden sheds. Heritage trains thunder along preserved loops, but the truly lost pulse lies on those unmourned miles between forgotten halts. Once, the guard's green flag was the village's heartbeat, fluttering with every departure into the wider world. Now, school leavers drag suitcases to distant coach stops, shoulders hunched against rain the old canopies once softened. Farmers remember posting milk churns on the early train instead of chasing distant supermarkets along clogged roads. Wedding parties spilled from carriages in stiff suits and borrowed hats, the platform their first shared red carpet. When the last timetable was printed, it already felt like an obituary disguised in railway font and ink. In some parishes, the station clock still hangs above the street, keeping time for buses that never wait. Teenagers once pressed faces to Rain Street glass, memorizing the shapes of fields they could not yet name. Those same fields now hold silent embankments where only sheep and dog walkers test the forgotten gradients. Platforms grew weeds where gossip once grew, thick and fast between mothers with prams and men with cases. The railway police house is a bungalow now, its guarder neatly hiding the line where jurisdiction ended. Postbags that rattled in guards' vans now crawl by van along twisting roads that were never meant for freight. Along the old route, pubs lost their last trains of drinkers and first trains of breakfast-bound commuters. Election leaflets promised better roads and faster cars, but never returned the single carriage that bound them all. In letters from the 60s, people wrote of shock and disbelief as if the land itself were being edited. A boy once jumped from the slow train to fetch apples, rejoining it laughing. His grandchildren know only time lapse. Railway cottages still stand in rows, their lace curtains twitching at every motorbike that mimics a distant express. Occasionally surveyors in fluorescent jackets appear, measuring, muttering, prodding sleepers long since lifted and sold. The villagers watch them from porches, daring not to hope, unwilling to grieve the same line twice. Guidebooks talk of scenic walks along disused railways, as if beauty were compensation for the loss of connection. Somewhere under moss and cinder, the rhythm still waits, counting the seconds between a whistle and its answering echo. In Wales, old viaducts stride across valleys like retired giants, their backs bare of any passing weight. Ticket punches lie forgotten in drawers beside ration books, reminders of queues, journeys, and quietly murmured destinations. The parcels office became a florist, then a locksmith, then an empty unit with fade-in to let signs. Where once trains threaded villages like beats, dual carriageways now roar past at a contemptuous distance. Signalmen could read the network like a second Bible. Their illuminated diagrams now gather dust in museums. In photographs, steam hangs above platforms like captured breath. Outside the frame, closure notices linger unseen. Newcomers stroll the track beds with dogs and reusable cups, unaware of how loud the silence used to be. Village storytellers describe trains that brought soldiers home, holidaymakers, bridegrooms, and occasionally bad news in telegram. The Beeching cuts redrew the emotional map, making some places feel suddenly further away than foreign capital. A child in a landlocked county once met the sea because a slow-stopping train insisted on every halt. Now, missed connections mean missed funerals, abandoned plants, friendships that shrink to postcards and brittle Christmas cards. Posters once promised everywhere in a day. After closure, even the next market town felt like an expedition. On misty evenings, locals swear they hear a phantom whistle drift along the alignment, then dismiss it politely. A preserved line offers cream teas and polished brass, but no guard shouts the names of forgotten villages. The nation learned to measure distance in junction numbers, not junction pubs, in service stations, not station cafes. Yet railway books still fill shelves at car boot sales, pages fox but place names sharp as Greek. Some platforms remain marooned in fields, reachable only by memory and a determined stride through cow parsley. The lost pulse of steam was never just mechanical, it was the sound of departure made ordinary, almost casual. Without it, goodbyes grew heavier, and hellos arrived on schedules no longer pinned to a village wall. Somewhere, under a line of ash trees, a buried rail still hums faintly when a distant freight thunders past. In the cities, closure felt like efficiency. In the shires, it felt like being quietly written out. Sunday outings once began with the smell of oil and coal. Now they start in car parks under sodium light. Grandparents talk about the slow train, their voices softening as if the words themselves move at steam speed. Children strapped into back seats know only traffic reports, diversions, and the boredom of motionless journeys. On old maps in parish halls, branch lines still scribble across counties like capillaries feeding distant organs. The organs remain, but the small lines that fed them have been surgically removed, without anaesthetic or replacement. You can trace the old route by pubs called the railway, the station, the locomotive, marooned from their purpose. Wedding photographs on mantelpieces show couples on platforms, unaware they are posing on borrowed time. The last steam specials drew crowds to embankments, people waving goodbye to something they could not quite name. Later, when the track was lifted, that same crowd was missing. Closure crews worked mostly with birds for company. In some places, road signs still point towards station, their arrows stubbornly leading into nettles and sapling. Even the word branch feels tender now, as if the line were a living limb rather than an accountancy entry. For commuters, rail survived in electrified form. For villagers, it vanished overnight, like a neighbour who moved away. Parliamentary debates filled columns, local grief filled kitchens, front rooms, the quiet space between spoon and sauce. The old station cat adopted the nearest farm, sleeping on sacks where parcels once waited for distant trains. At dusk, the cut-in becomes a green tunnel, the air cooling as if in expectation of an approaching engine. Every so often, a campaign group forms, waving petitions like flags, asking for one more train, one more chance. Their leaflets speak of carbon, congestion and growth, but between each line lies the ache of simple belonging. The nation still moves, perhaps faster than ever, but not quite to the same internal timetable as before. Somewhere a child hears a preserved whistle, feels a shiver, and wonders why grown men suddenly look away. In winter, frost outlines the buried formation so cleanly that hedges seem to copy an invisible timetable. Old guards remember the weight of responsibility in their pocket watches, now silent heirlooms in bedside drawers. Some disused tunnels are bricked up, their mouths sealed like conversations nobody dared to finish aloud. Others breathe out cold air onto passing hikers, a memory of drafts once pushed by pistons and pistons of steam. Local myths grow along the track-bed ghost trains, vanished porters, a signal forever stuck at green. But the truest ghosts are ordinary, a lost suitcase, a missed letter, a friendship that faded with the service. New lines are promised in glossy documents, yet rarely follow the exact scars left by those earlier cuts. So maps fill with abstractions while villages remember specific trains at specific times with specific faces. On heritage days, visiting ministers wave from carriage windows, rehearsing nostalgia as if it were policy. Meanwhile, an old man in a cul-de-sac wonders why nobody asked what it felt like when his station died. The lost pulse of steam was really the sound of options, the chance to leave, to return, to simply go. When that rhythm stopped, some places did not just grow quieter, they grew smaller inside their own head. Yet along the old alignments, blackberries thrive, as if the hedgerows are patiently reclaiming mice' departure. Walkers pause on former platforms and without thinking, look up the line before stepping forward again. The habit outlives the railway, that instinct to check for an oncoming future before crossing its path. At night, rain drums on corrugated iron where canopies once sheltered crowds, mimicking the roll of distant wheels. Somewhere, a box of unused Edmondson tickets gathers dust, each one a journey never taken, a story untold. The cuts made economic sense on paper, yet paper cannot vibrate like rails under a nearing locomotive. So the country hums along motorways, efficient and isolated, while the old track beds keep their slower counsel. Listen closely on a still evening, and you may feel it not a sound, but an absence perfectly timed. In magazines, photographs of abandoned stations sit beside recipes and gardening tips, domesticating what was once movement. The last coal smoke has long dispersed, yet people still describe certain mornings as a railway weather. Artists sketch viaducts against bruised skies, capturing arches that now carry only swallows and telephone cables. Songwriters borrow station names for choruses, trusting that something in those syllables still tugs at listeners. In model railway clubs, retirees rebuild the lines on plywood, this time without accountants at the junction. Tiny branch trains circle endlessly, never facing closure, never arriving at a final, quietly brutal timetable. Back in the real fields, foxes patrol the ballast, masters of a network no survey ever mapped. Lanterns, once swung to start departures, now hang in hallways, lighting only shoes and umbrellas. A preserved whistle on a mantelpiece looks decorative until someone blows it and the room falls oddly silent. People who never rode those trains still feel the loss, inherited like eye colour or regional accent. For Britain, the railway was never just infrastructure. It was a way of thinking in connections, not cul-de-sacs. The Beeching years marked a quiet turning, when the map of everyday possibilities began to fold inward. Now, when a new line opens, ribbon cuttings echo faintly against the memory of thousands of unsung closures. Those unsung miles remain, stitched through fields and suburbs, an invisible network of might-have-beens. If you stand there long enough, boots on old sleepers, you can almost tap your foot to the missing beat. In village halls, commemorative plaques mention wars and coronations, but rarely the day the last train left. Still in conversation, people date events as before they took the line, or after the station went. The memory's granular Tuesday markets, Friday pay packets, Sunday visits, all once paced by the timetable. Now those same journeys require favours, lifts, elaborate planning, or are simply never made at all. For some, the railway was an escape hatch. For others, it was the reassurance that escape existed. When it closed, both comfort and temptation vanished, leaving a stillness that did not feel like peace. In archives, there are photographs of staff lined up neatly, unaware they are framed on the edge of disappearance. Their uniforms look permanent, only the captions reveal how briefly that particular future lasted. Today's planners speak of connectivity in slideshows. Yesterday's villagers knew it as a familiar face at the ticket window. The lost pulse of the steam railways is not measured in trains per hour, but in lives per platform.